Hello, my name is Linda McDonald, and this is Jean Sarson with me, and together we're from Persons Against Non-State Torture. It's a campaign that Jean and I started in 1993, 29 years ago, in Truro, Nova Scotia. We started working with one woman who identified herself as Sarah, and she disclosed that she was tortured and trafficked by her parents, by like-minded others, and tortured and trafficked till she was an adult woman, actually. And from that grassroots knowledge, we started our grassroots research and spoke with thousands of women all over the world, sharing the same stories as Sarah. And we've listened to their voices and developed a grassroots science research framework about what non-state torture is. And we're happy to share it with you today. So the first slide, Jean, please. What Jean and I did is we developed our work with models to help us understand the crime and the human rights violation, and then now we can use it as a form of education. So you'll see that this is the patriarchal divide that we developed, and it's part of our grassroots science, that torture is committed by non-state actors and is the intentional infliction of severe pain and suffering. So with the patriarchal divide, what we're saying is that state torture and non-state torture are basically the same as far as the action of the perpetrators are concerned. The only difference, or the main difference, is that the perpetrators in non-state torture are families, or they're strangers, or traffickers, or pornographers, pimps in prostitution, or buyers. So if you look at the acts of non-state torture, you'll compare on the left side to the state torture. There's electric shocking, beating, caging, water tortures, suffocation tortures, sexualized tortures, forced drugging, nutritional deprivation, psychological tortures, forced nakedness, sleep deprivation, and the witnessing of the torture of others, and the powerlessness. And why we call it a patriarchal divide is because in state torture, the primary victims are men. And that's where we started looking at torture after the war and warring men. But in non-state torture, it happens to women and girls primarily in their homes, in hotels, or in huts. And they deserve the same recognition of suffering the same crime of torture. Indeed, that it is the same crime and human rights violation. So that's the patriarchal divide. Next slide, Jean, please. So we're trying to explain to you with an example of three women that we supported, Sarah and Lynn and Elizabeth, to give you a sense of the criminal and formal networks of the organized family systems of torturers and traffickers. With Sarah, her father, her mother, even government employees were the key organizers involved in corruption and the torture and trafficking of her as a little girl up to the age of an adult woman. And her drawing shows a torture chamber in the basement of her own home that she endured for many years as a child and even as an adult woman. And Lynn is the second one. She married a man who became her torturer, her husband and her torturer. And he, along with three of his male friends, they kept her captive in a windowless room for 4.5 years until she escaped. This is just one example of what Lynn endured. I'll give you an example. And also there were police involved that came and tortured her, and they were part of the criminal protection of the group of her husband and the three friends. So Lynn endured a group gang rape where she was raped with a knife and she started to hemorrhage. And then she was taken to what she called the pig doctor, where he supposedly fixed her up and stopped her from hemorrhaging. And of course, the pig doctor would then be part of the criminal informal network. But remember that she endured much more than this. This is just one example. And then there's Elizabeth. She's a daughter of a father, a mother, and an uncle who tortured and trafficked her for many years from the time she was little to a much older person. And she was sold at the age of 5. And there's a drawing of her showing herself being transferred from her parents to strangers where she would be tortured and trafficked. Now I'll leave it the next 2 slides for Jean.
So this is the third slide, a way of explaining the non-state actor torture that, like Linda said, for 29 years, we've been supporting women. Category 1, Linda has already explained. Category 2, we call it classic non-state torture commercial-based acts because the perpetrators are making money off of the trafficking, the prostitution, torture, and snuff pornography victimizations, and also migrant domestic worker may be enslaved and tortured by her employer. And category 3, we call it social cultural traditions or religious-based acts, and we're list here female genital mutilation, child marriage, acid burning, and widow burning, which we're told is declining. And this list comes from UN reports. And our final explanatory PowerPoint is about global truth-telling, is explaining the severe pain and suffering that millions of women and girls are surviving on this planet. So we start with the World Health Organization, who tells us 1/3 of the world's women and girls over the age of 15 suffer physical and sexualized violence. But because non-state actor torture is not identified, they are invisible. But we know not only are women and girls tortured, as Linda has explained in category 1, they're also exploited, and that's category 2. And the exploitation can start as newborns, and they become part of the 1 million children who suffer sexualized exploitation and suffer non-state torture too. And sexualized exploitation of women, we also know women are tortured, and also in the domestic workers who may be enslaved, and 71% of women and girls are part of the enslavement and forced labor. And some of these women will be tortured by their employer. And prostituted women, they do our participatory research, and they talk about the non-state torture that they've suffered, category 2 again. Category 3 starts with child brides, and they may also suffer non-state torture by their so-called in-laws or others. FGM, category 3 again. And widow rituals, that's also category 3, and they may be suffered commercial based if they're forced into prostitution, acid burning, and sorcery and witch hunts. And they may be tortured, and they may also end up as a femicide. And what we're asking for state parties to do is to work collectively to create a declaration that can work as a model strategy to raise global awareness and to end non-state actor torture.
Thank you.